So in this video, I just want to have a conversation with y'all. Hence the reason we're in my studio where I film my other channel's videos. But the topic I want to cover is, what is the Transalp, or who is the Transalp for? And of course, some comparisons to some of the other ADV bikes I have had. And I think a lot of us will really agree on what the Transalp is. It's real funny. My man over at Big Rock Moto, Ian, he actually made a really good statement on the Transalp saying it's a bike with a very big identity crisis. Because honestly, when you look at the Transalp, is it an adventure bike? Is it just a road bike? Is it a touring bike? Who knows? And right in line with that, the first bike comparison I want to talk about here is the Honda NC750X. This goes right in line with the Honda Transalp. Honda classes the NC750X underneath their adventure bikes, which is kind of weird. Now, I owned an NC750X 2021, I believe it was. Loved the bike. Absolutely love it. I miss it to this day. I built that one out really nice. Go check it out. And honestly, any bit of the off-roading I have done with the Transalp, I've done with the NC750X. Very different, right? The NC750X, for example, again, I don't think it deserves to be in the adventure class by any means. It's definitely more of a road bike or a budget class touring bike, I guess you can say. I believe it only comes in DCT now, which is the version I had, which I absolutely love DCT. I really do. Not for off-roading, but for on-road, I love DCT. The Transalp weighs 459, and then the NC is 493 pounds. That's not a massive difference to really like make a decision there, but the NC750, the gas tank is behind the seat. So stinking cool. Where the gas tank is, you got a little storage cubby up there, right? So anyways, that weight is really much lower and distributed pretty fair. You got the engine up here, you got your gas tank, you know what I mean? The Transalp feels much heavier than the NC750X, especially like at a stoplight or just moving it around or anything like that. The other big thing from the NC to the Transalp is a suspension. Like the little bit of fire roads, if you got a little washout or something, or you hit a little pothole or something, the NC will bottom out instantly. A good comparison on the NC750 as far as suspension feel is like a Honda Rebel. That's exactly what it feels like. If you've ever ridden a Honda Rebel, you're going over a bridge, that sucker bottoms out. That's exactly what it feels like. The NC to the Transalp is kind of like, okay, well, is the Transalp an adventure bike? Well, what is the NC? Is it just a touring bike? They both are, I think, lost in translation with Honda right there. It's kind of like, what the heck are both of these? But as far as basic core sitting on them, I will tell you they both feel, as far as height and stuff and ergonomics, they feel the same. Again, yes, the weight is different, but the NC still feels lighter, but sitting on them, they feel very, very similar. And again, I can't state it enough. I love and miss my NC750X. The next bike I want to compare it to is the KTM890. The KTM comes in at 463 pounds. So again, pretty much right in line with the Transalp. I will tell you this straight out the gate, no questions asked. The KTM feels incredibly lighter because that gas tank is much lower. It is night and day difference. Again, I stated it before when I had my KTM. That was so cool. You can really ride it like a sports bike. And I said the same thing about the Transalp. The Transalp feels like a sports bike. That's not just because of the weight. That's because like the throttle response and stuff like that. But you can really buzz around on the Transalp. But the KTM, when I went up to Tennessee on it, did Blue Ridge Parkway and then the Tail of the Dragon, I was like, okay, this isn't my riding style. You know, I was getting a little bit more spicy than I usually prefer to. But that weight down low is just amazing. You can just flick that bike around and you can walk it over obstacles. It's a really interesting bike to get on. It definitely is. I would say the KTM is hands down built more for off-road than the Transalp straight out of the box. Once you give the Transalp some time, like we have done on this channel, go watch the mods and all that stuff, and we've really made it into something pretty special. But the KTM, there's no question about it that it is definitely more of an off-road focused bike right out of the box. Even the base 890, we're not even talking about the R. When you go into the R, I don't think there's any comparison. I did long highway stints on the 890 as well, and it wasn't fun. The engine is just, it was buzzy. It felt small. I felt like I was sitting on top of it rather than in it. And me personally, I like sitting inside my motorcycles. And on the Transalp, I feel like the Transalp is built better for, again, a tour. That is no question. If you want something more off-road focused, yeah, the KTM takes the cake for sure. The one thing I didn't like about my KTM and what made me sell it, it felt very cheap for $14,000. And again, I was coming off an Africa Twin Adventure Sport. Now, I know a lot of people say it's all plastic because of that lightweight and then it's easy to repair because it's off-road. At the end of the day of all this, right, It's how are you riding? What are you doing? And I like that mixture, easy to medium off-road and then some touring. I want to be comfortable touring, and the KTM didn't do that. And again, it just kept sitting in my mind. I'm like, man, this bike just doesn't feel like $14,000 to me. Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro. It was a 2023 I had, so it was pretty recent. As y'all know, I was in my accident, went off the mountain, broke my ankle, totaled the Triumph. I love that bike, and it gave me a true passion and respect and want for Triumph motorcycles. It really did with that Tiger 900 Rally Pro. Now, the Rally Pro comes in at 483 pounds. You can feel the difference compared to the Transalp as far as that weight when you're sitting on it. The Triumph feels just a pinch taller, not drastically, but it does feel a little bit taller, but that weight is definitely more up. If I was to compare this to something, it would be the next bike we're going to talk about, which is spoiler, is going to be the Africa Twin, but that is what this feels like. This feels like a mini Africa Twin-ish kind of, which is I think what we all wanted from the Transalp. The Triumph does feel a little bit more top heavy. It's not ridiculous, but you do notice it. The premium quality of the Triumph is unmatched. It is phenomenal. Even though Honda does it right and they do their stuff really good, Triumph goes above and beyond, I feel. And that Tiger 900 just solidified that. I mean, it was such a solid bike. It really was phenomenal. Now, there were some downfalls about the Triumph. Number one, like when the service light comes on, you got to take it into the shop unless you go buy one of those little things that'll flash it or whatever. That kind of stuff drove me nuts. The tire pressure monitor system always came on if you aired down a little bit, which is just annoying because I don't want lights on my screen. The skid plate and crash bars that came on were kind of chintzy, and I did swap those out. It felt like a true ADV bike that you can tour on, and I did. I did the Smoky Mountain 500 on it, 8 hours, 7 hours, whatever, on the highway, and it was phenomenal. It really was. The Transalp is easier off-road. Even if you're doing a basic fire road, you just feel more planted and locked in and a little bit lower. The Transalp, you do feel like you're sitting a little bit more. As far as wind blockage, I think you get a little bit more on the Transalp as far as wind blockage compared to the Triumph. And I'm talking mild. I'm not talking windshield, because stock windshields are usually garbage in my book anyways, but especially down by your legs. That's another thing that drove me nuts on the Triumph is the vents from the fans. That heat would come on your legs. And me living down south, that was a bummer sometimes, especially during hot times. Now, if you're in a cold climate, that's a pro. That's going to be a benefit, you know what I mean? It's hard to compare these two. You're talking the Tiger Rally Pro here is $17,400. It's $8,000 more than a Transalp. It's really not even a fair comparison. I think the regular Rally is like 13 or 14. That's still a significant amount more. You can buy a Transalp modded out to like I have out there and still have money in your pocket. And that's what makes the Transalp truly stand out. But yes, I'd love the Triumph much more than the Transalp. But again, that is, you can buy almost 2 Transalps. Now I want to talk about my love, my favorite bike, the old Africa Twin, my dream bike. Oh my gosh, I love that bike. Holy smokes. No questions, it was heavy. I believe right at 551 pounds, we're talking. Depends if you get the manual, the base, or whatever, the Adventure Sport, DCT, 551 pounds. So you're talking pretty much 100 pounds more than a Transalp. And it feels way over 100 pounds more than a Transalp. That gas tank is up high. It's a massive gas tank. It is a huge bike, and no questions asked about it. The Transalp is easier to ride off-road, even though the Transalp's heavy. I'm not saying the Transalp is light, so don't take my words wrong here, but the Africa Twin is massive. It's a handful. I learned the hard way what not to do with it. I got this mindset that is like, oh, I want to explore, I want to go do things, I'm going to take that right turn, let me just go down there and see what's down there. I've learned with the Africa Twin not to do that. With the Transalp, I might do it a little bit, but I do still hold myself back a little bit on that. The base Africa Twin is 14.5. Now, they're coming out with the new 2024s, but they changed them up big time. Like the Adventure Sport has the 19-inch front wheel, so it's more like a BMW. Comparing the Adventure Sport to the Transalp really isn't a fair ball game either. The Africa Twin, you got the heated grips, you got that cruise control, electronic suspension. The Africa Twin is so much more built for off-road, but I don't think many of us can handle it off-road. Again, that's depending on skill level. But for me, I could not do many things on the Africa Twin off-road. Again, talking about me taking a Triumph Tiger 900 on the Smoky 500, that was a handful, but I did it. And I don't think I only went down once, water crossings and everything. Could have I done it on the Africa Twin? I think so. Not with the DCT that I had. I would not do that with DCT. And if I was to buy another Africa Twin, I would not get DCT as much as I love it. You know what? Let me retract that statement. Maybe I would buy an Africa Twin with DCT, because now I realize I'm not going to be doing aggressive off-roading with it. I would do more touring with the Africa Twin. 80% of the time, if not more, we're on the road, right? You're riding the highway doing a little bit of off-roading, like don't deny it, right? We're doing those BMW, the GSs, or the Africa Twins. The majority of the time is on road, and that's perfectly fine. What is your adventure, right? And I think that's why Honda's making it with that 19-inch front wheel, because they understand this is what the majority of people are wanting. And I might want DCT with that 19-inch front wheel for that better touring, and I can hit that little fire road if I want here or there. I think that would cover it. The Africa Twin blows the Transalp away. The Transalp is not a mini Africa Twin. I know a lot of people wanted it to be. I wanted it to be. I see now why Honda didn't make the Transalp cruise control tubeless tires, because their base Africa Twin is now that, right? The base Africa Twin, the 2024s, come with tubeless tires, cruise control. I think you can even get it with electronic suspension. There's a lot of different variants with it. I got my eyes hot and heavy on a new Africa Twin, a 2024 Africa Twin. I really do. I love the Africa Twin. I love the platform. I love the way it rides. It's extremely heavy, but if I understand it's heavy and put my expectations of what I can do on the bike, then I think I'll have a better time on it than I did on my first one. But no, the Transalp's not a mini Africa Twin. It's not even close. The Africa Twin blows it away, but the Africa Twin is a massive, heavy bike. They're two completely different bikes. They really are. Now, the next bike I want to talk about with the comparison here is not one I have owned, but one I've shopped around. A buddy of mine, he owned, I believe it was a 21 or something, and that is the Suzuki V-strom. Now, of course, we all know they just remodeled them and everything, and just looking at them, I think they look pretty sharp. The weight is more on the V-strom, coming at 500 and some change. Sitting on my buddies, the V-strom feels heavier. It just, again, with that bigger tank up high, it feels a little bit heavier up there. But as far as ergonomics and sitting on it, they're very, very similar as far as the wind blockage, the bars, the seat and everything. But again, at the core, I think this is the best bike to compare to. I really get that vibe here. I hear a lot of people compare the Transalp to the Tenere 700, and I think there should be more coverage on it compared to the V-strom 800 DE, the new ones. And it's a shame that there's not more coverage like this. I think it's because the Suzuki is not as popular as the Tenere. The Tenere is an incredibly popular bike. The Transalp's incredibly popular. The Suzuki's kind of like, it's over here. You got to get them clicks. And more people are going to click on Transalp and T7 rather than Transalp and Suzuki. The V-strom is $11,349, so you're talking $1,300 more. Is it worth it? I don't know, the exhaust is higher just looking at it here. What else does it come with, you know? As far as looks, that's subjective. I think they both look pretty darn good. I want to hear from you guys, if you own or what you think. This is one that's really been on my mind, and I really want to, again, I want more coverage on this. But again, with me not owning one, it's something I want to hear about. The V-strom, the newer ones versus the Transalp. This thing needs more coverage. And this, if you're truly looking at that price range in this category of bike, mild off-roading and a little more touring, these are the two that need to be on your list. And since we were just talking about it, let's go ahead and talk about it a little bit more. The Yamaha Tenere 700. And believe it or not, I almost bought one of these. 2 years ago, this bike was the talk of the town. Starting to die down a little bit here, right? You can find them a whole lot more easy. The Tenere is slim, it's tall, and again, that gas tank is up high. Now, in line with that, as we all know with the Tenere, it's definitely an off-road focused bike. It is built for that off-roading. But I was just thinking about this here, talking about the Transalp to the Tenere, and I'm looking at it now, I'm like, the Tenere, yeah, no questions asked, is better for off-road, especially out of the box, but I think it takes a little bit more skill. And I know we all don't want to rag on our own skill and say I can't handle it or whatever. I wouldn't want to handle the Tenere. I wouldn't want to deal with that extra weight. I'd rather pick my line a little bit more and be able to walk it over an obstacle on the Transalp compared to the Tenere. For my riding style, where I'm a little more slow-paced, I want to sightsee and just have a good time. I'm not out here trying to race or be crazy. That's where the Transalp really sits. Like I just talked about the V-strom There's so much comparison between the Transalp and the Tenere 700. Honestly, they are different bikes. The Tenere is more or less a beefed up Honda 300L. Maybe the 300L Rally. That's what the Tenere is, a beefed up version of that. I don't think it really deserves the comparison of the Transalp, because the Transalp is definitely more road and tourer focused. And the Tenere is, no questions asked, more off-road focused. Price is also fair, which could also be another trigger point on it, right? They're both right at $10,000. Tenere, $10,800, so $800 more. I do like the tech on the Transalp compared to the Tenere. I believe they're coming out with a new one that has a little bit more tech, but I like the tech on the Transalp there. So for someone like me that does light to medium off-roading, and I like going on longer rides, Transalp all day long. The Tenere is if you are primarily riding off-road. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the Honda Transalp itself. Again, talking about some of the bikes I've owned, some of the bikes I've shopped. I don't script. I'm just talking about user's experience. If you want specs, all of the manufacturers' websites have them. I don't need to sit here and quote the back of the box for you, right? I want to talk about my user's experience, and hopefully I'm translating that out to you guys. And I want to talk about the Transalp. Now that you heard me talk about some of the other bikes, you know what I like. You know my riding style. The Transalp is a great bike, especially for 10,000 bucks. I don't know why. This is what's so weird about Honda, right? The NC, the Transalp, they put it in their Adventure class. It's $9,999, right? Because they got to stay underneath that $10,000 point. So right along with the weight, it's $459. It's not $460, right? Honda just wants to keep it in that category where they know it will sell. And that honestly sums up the Transalp, right? It's a bike that's going to sell. It's a great bike, yet that Honda reliability. It's manageable for a lot of people. It's not big. It's not massive like an Africa Twin. You know, the price is right. The build is great. But for me, as I stated before, it irks me and eats me alive that the tires are tubed. Number one, because I just can't change them. And that's me. That's my fault. I've tried, I've practiced, I got a nice machine, and I just can't change tube tires. So I got to go off and pay, even though I like changing, trying different tires, I got to pay for that. More importantly, no cruise control, right? And I know people say, oh, cruise control, this tech, right? Why don't you just ride a car? Well, I do. I ride a Tesla Model Y, and it self-drives for me, and I love it. But on my bike, if I'm riding up to Tennessee, or I want to go ride a long distance or something, I want to jump on a highway, I want to hit that cruise control and just ride. If you're sitting there for 5 hours and you're pinned down, that's one thing I really, really want. And I think what Honda has to do here is, again, you got this Transalp. They're so close. Maybe next year, if they come out with the Transalp Adventure Sport, right? Make it $12,000, give it tubeless wheels and cruise control, game over. But why I think Honda can't do that right now is because, again, they're coming out with the new Africa Twins, and the base Africa Twin, right around $14,000, does what we want the Transalp to do. Even though it's bigger and a little bit heavier, they took what we want and made that base Africa Twin what we want out of the Transalp. The previous base Africa Twin was kind of like the Transalp, had tube tires. So if they released a smaller Transalp, I think it would squash a lot of the sales of the new Africa Twin. That's what I think would happen. So I don't even know if we'll see it next year. Maybe the following year, 2025, we might see the Transalp Adventure Sport, seeing how this sells, which obviously right now it's the hype of the town. So that's what I think. That's what I want to see. That's what I think Honda will do. But we'll have to wait and see. So there we go. My comparison and what is the Transalp? Who is it for? Well, that's for you to decide. You can compare my riding style to yours. You know, what can a Transalp do? It really depends on the rider, not the bike, you know. Take your stinking Honda Rebel off-road, put some knobbies on it, you know what I mean? As far as me, you can catch through this video and my other videos, I really like the Transalp. I do, but there are things that really eat away at me on the Transalp. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, it's in my mind, and it might happen sooner than later. I am seriously on the verge of selling my Transalp to get ready for the 2024 Africa Twin, right? You might think, oh, well, you're not going to be able to do what you can do on the Africa Twin as you can do on the Transalp. It's going to be bigger and heavier. Well, I just recently bought a 2023 300L Rally. I love that bike. I'm having so much fun on that bike. I've owned many 300Ls. I got to start doing more coverage on that Rally, even though it's been covered before. But I've owned 4 300Ls, now having a Rally, and that bike is phenomenal. I love it. It is what it is. It's not trying to be something else, you know what I mean? But I want to hear from you guys, right? This is just my riding style and my preferences. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about the Transalp? And are you like me? Do you agree that the Transalp needs more coverage to the Suzuki V-strom 800DE? I think that's what we need. Let's stop talking about the T7. Let's start talking about the V-strom. But anyways, thank you all so much for coming along for this little chat, this conversation here. I hope it helped you out, and I hope you enjoyed it. If it did, please hit that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I hope to catch you on the next adventure. Bye now.